I have a concept I talked about, wet feet faith. Dry feet faith. When the Israelites got to the Red Sea, they had an army coming behind them. The Red Sea opened up and they crossed over on dry land. And so they had some people behind them that were trying to kill them. So for Moses to convince them to go to the sea, and they saw a miracle. They saw a miracle, the sea split. So it's not, and you got some people behind you trying to kill you. So it's easy to have peace. Let me go forward through this dry land. I just saw God miraculously split the ocean. Yeah, you're going to have peace. But when they got to the Jordan, God told them, oh, you got to step in the river first. They didn't see any miracles. They got this roaring river. They had to step into it first before God would show up. So sometimes you got to step into it. You got to step out on faith. Sometimes you have to step out on faith before God will show up. You need. So I call it wet feet faith. So the Israelites crossed on dry land, but when they crossed the Jordan, they had to get their feet wet first. They had to step out into the river, step out into the uncomfortable. So you're not going to necessarily be comfortable when you walk into your calling. So sometimes it's going to be uncomfortable. I remember one time I got laid off, and I thought, okay, I'm a software engineer. I'm in Silicon Valley. I should have an easy time finding a job. And I'm submitting and getting rejected and submitting and just hearing no response. So I started getting worried. And then at some point, God told me, stop submitting. And I was like, why would I do that? so after some time and some confirmations, I eventually stopped applying for jobs. And he was, and then God told me, I've been complaining about I didn't have time to do anything. And he was like, you got time now. And that was back, when the Warriors, before they were doing good. So it's like you get Warrior tickets for $8. I was like, okay, let me just go and enjoy life. And then after a couple of months, an old colleague called me and told me of a job opportunity. And so I, so it took a while for me to have peace with it. So you're not always going to have peace when you step out, but sometimes you have to step out on faith, get confirmation, and that's why sometimes you may have to get an opinion of someone in the church, and it's not always going to be something you want to do. It's easy to have peace when it's the dream you've been dreaming of all your life. If it's something you've been dreaming of all your life, it's easy to have peace doing it and stepping into it. But when it's not something you would have chosen, you're not going to always have peace. So you got to have faith and you got to have obedience.